Okay, well, it is right at noon, at least Central Time. I just want to say welcome to the Santé webinar titled Too Many Jobs and Not Enough Physicians. What does that mean for your pathology job search? My name is Missy Morgan, and I am the Director of Marketing here at Santé Consulting. And I want to give you just a little bit of background about Santé, since some of you, this might be your first interaction with us. Santé Consulting is a lab medicine recruiting and consulting company. We're based here in the US out of St. Louis, and we're very niched. We focus exclusively on the recruitment and consulting of or retention of pathologists, PhDs, and lab medicine executives at the director level and above. Now, Santé was founded by Rich Cornell, who is on this call. He's going to speak to you next. He founded Santé Consulting in 2008, although his experience in recruiting within the lab medicine industry spans just over 3 decades. So we've got a lot of history, a lot of experience on the team that's on the call today. We're really proud because we place more lab executives and pathologists than any other third-party search firm in the US. And one of our passions is connecting with you, with people who are job searching within lab medicine. So we've got some really great nuggets to share with you today. I hope you find it useful. I wanted to also, before I hand it over to Rich, I wanted to give you an idea of why we chose the topic today. When you think about today's market, it's very saturated with jobs. So it's a very candidate-driven market. So a lot of you might say, hey, Santé, why are you doing a call to help the candidate when we've got a really plush market, a lot of opportunities to choose from? The reason why is because when you have a lot of options like that, which is pretty unprecedented for this industry, this is sort of a new phenomenon to have such a saturated market. That means you have a lot of options. And when you have more options, it's helpful to have resources to help you think through things and land on the ideal job for you. So when we were writing this article that kind of drove the webinar, we were thinking, well, what happened? How did we get to this place where we're at today? And I wanted to give you that baseline so you know what we're working from, what caused it. Number one, right now, the US is experiencing a physician shortage, and I'm sure that's not a shock to you. Healthcare in general is experiencing a big labor shortage, but the physician shortage is important for this call. Number two, we have that shortage, and then physician intent to leave their current job is actually rising. So the hole is getting a little bit bigger. Number three, for the past several years, pathology residency programs have been training fewer people. That's because back in the day, there weren't as many jobs available. And so they were kind of cutting back on the spots. But now we got to correct ourselves because the market is flooded. So the good news is residency programs are starting to increase the number of people that they're training. So there's been improvement there. But we kind of sit where we're sitting anyway, right? And we are hearing through research that employers are saying this: the number of pathologists that they plan to hire exceeds the number that are planning to retire. So when you think about this kind of these openings, these job openings, they're just growing and growing. And so now we want to bring to you, well, what does that mean for you? And how can you excel and win in your job search? Without any further ado, I'm going to tell you the 3 things we're going to talk about and hand it off to Rich. We're going to cover in more depth through Rich today's job market landscape. What does it really look like? How many jobs are out there? And then he's going to turn it over to Jeremiah Job. He's our senior recruiter specialist, and he's going to talk about what does the ultimate search strategy look like and how do you interview to win? So Rich, I'm going to hand it off to you. Just make sure you're not on mute, and I'll give you the spotlight.
Missy, thanks for the introduction and the background information. Welcome everybody to our webinar this afternoon. I'm Rich Cornell. I'm the founder of Santé Consulting. I'm excited to talk on this topic. You know, I was thinking about this when 2 things came to mind when Missy was speaking. One is when she says, you know, 3 decades. You know, I was very young when I started in the business, by the way, Missy. So just as you were,
I forgot to say that, Rich. I forgot to say
that. And 2, you know, this is the first webinar of its kind. You know, we've never done in pathology that I'm aware of a webinar that is, focused on a candidate-driven market. And so, these are changing times. And, today's job market for today, there are more openings today than I've ever seen in the last 20 years. And so that's a big indication of where the market's going. I remember, for many years, the market in healthcare was driven by primary care. And there was always a physician shortage for primary care specialists. And that's not true today any longer. Now it's the highly specialized fields that there are shortages, and we're seeing shortages as I'm speaking to peer owners with other firms across the nation that do things outside of pathology, that they're experiencing the same candidate shortages as we are in pathology. And so, this is uncharted water for many of us that have been in the industry for many years on how we react and how do groups recruit and how do candidates kind of navigate their way through the process. The persona for many years with pathology has been, you don't want to be going to pathology because it's a tough job market. You're going to have a hard time finding a job. And so that barrier has been broken. One of the things that was the outcome of and I believe COVID is that, with the pandemic really brought lab medicine to the forefront of everybody's minds and put lab medicine into the limelight. And as such, it became an attractive specialty for those in training programs and medical students. However, when we looked at the pre-pandemic numbers, there was a couple of surveys that came out. One was through JAMA, and the other was through the College of American Pathologists, that predicted starting in about 2019, there was going to be a shortage of pathologists because the number of residency slots weren't being filled, the number of pathologists that were due to retire over the next 5 or 6 years was increasing. The one thing that they didn't predict is the pandemic. And then all of a sudden it exploded when things opened back up. The point that Missy made earlier with the residency slots is a great point, because many of them for years went unfilled. This year was the first year, and from what I'm told, one of the highest matched years in pathology ever. There was a 98% match that took place earlier in the year for pathology programs. And so that's an indication. Unfortunately, those residents that are matching today aren't going to impact the workforce for at least another 5 years. So what I want to talk about is, the current job market and what that looks like as far as active jobs to date. And so a great, I guess, indicator of that is what we look at it on pathology outlines. And so, let's see, next slide. Thank you. And so here's a quick graph that gives you the indication of the market. So if you look at pre-COVID in January of 2020, the market was pretty good. And then all of a sudden things shut down. It started getting better from, if you see mid-19 to January of 20, it started to increase. And this is those predictions that were coming true from those surveys. All of a sudden we had the pandemic, things shut down. You can see what happened to the job markets. Everybody contracted and said, oh, let's put hiring freezes into effect. And then when things started opening back up, especially in lab medicine, because volumes now, not only did we have, the surgeons that don't like to sit idle, all of a sudden cutting again, volumes are on the increase. The second thing is all of a sudden you've got in the clinical labs, now you've got an explosion of clinical lab tests on the COVID side, and the market just exploded. And this graph speaks volumes. And so you can see that we, over the last many years, and if you look at it even further back, You know, it's doubled in size as far as the number of jobs. And keep in mind, the pathology outlines is not the only source of what jobs are really out there. Some jobs never even make it to pathology outlines. So there's far greater more jobs that are out there than is what reflective here. So where are the jobs? If you're a candidate and you look at the statistics, so if you look at Q1 of 22 versus 20 and 21, we're seeing, and we've always seen in the Northeast, the majority of the jobs. But if you look at how 21 ended, 30% of the openings were in the Northeast, and that's true today. And so we're still seeing out migration. The second biggest area is the South. And so there's, you know, a lot of openings in the South. A lot of people have moved into the southern states from the Northeast. So the volume expectations, the surgical volumes, the workloads are increasing. The retirements are still happening, but the workloads are increasing. So that's why we're seeing, and from what we're told by our clients, the number of openings in that region. During COVID, we had the Great Resignation. And so many of the groups, when the shutdown happened, if anybody was on kind of the cusp of thinking about retiring, or if a group had somebody near retirement, they either had the conversation with them, with the person that was near retirement, saying, "Hey, you should probably retire. We don't know how this pandemic's going to, you know, how we're going to come out on the other end of this financially and volume-wise. So you might as well go ahead and retire." So it really also, with people that were kind of on the fence of retiring, you know, people's life's priorities changed. And so they went ahead and retired. You know, when I drive around St. Louis, I see help wanted signs everywhere. And I think to myself, where are the people? What happened to the people? Where we've got so many jobs in so many areas. Healthcare is no different than most of the other industries that are out there because of that. So it's interesting. Mayo Clinic did a study back last year, and they found that 1 in 5 physicians plan to exit in the next 2 years overall. 1 in 3 doctors and other healthcare professionals intend to reduce their work hours in the next 3 years. So this shortage and what you're experiencing as far as the number of jobs is only going to get worse for the employer if you're trying to hire, better for the candidate if you're looking to get a job. And Jeremiah is going to talk to you, the candidate, if you're looking for a job, on strategies and how to kind of maneuver and manage all of these openings. So, because you don't need to look at everything that's available out there if you're a specialist. Next slide. And then this graph certainly tells us exactly what it looks like, you know, as far as the expected, the number of hires to the number of candidates that are available. And the point that I want to make here is volume are increasing. The workload volumes for pathologists in groups have substantially increased. And, you know, we're having more and more conversations with our clients that are looking at hiring 2 pathologists to replace 1 because of a number of reasons: work-life balance, volume expectations, compensation, etc. And then what does this all mean for you as a candidate as you're looking to navigate your next career step in your path? With that, I'm going to introduce Jeremiah Job. Jeremiah is a senior recruiter with me, with the firm. He has over 16 years of healthcare experience. He's been with Santé Consulting, specializing in lab medicine for the last 4 years. He has a master's degree in healthcare administration from St. Louis University. He is the real deal. And with that, I'm going to give you Jeremiah Job. Thank you.
Well, with an introduction like that, hopefully I don't strike out. So thank you, Rich. Thank you, Missy, for the introduction. I hope to talk to everyone on this webinar, and continue the discussion on opportunities. It's funny, just kind of real behind the scenes, right before we hit record, we were talking about a client in Oklahoma. And, I'm from Georgia, so it's, you could say Southeast. And Missy's kind of from Texas, so she said the South. We couldn't quite place Oklahoma. So if you could in the chat, tell us where you think Oklahoma fits in the United States region, that'd be great, because it'd help us out in our, literally right before we hit record, we were talking.
Yeah, that'll solve a team dispute. We don't want that to last very long.
That's right. That's right. So, right now, from what Rich said, be aware of what employers are looking for in candidates. If you're a GI pathologist, obviously you're going to be looking at GI cases. There are more hospital-based surgical pathology cases than people to cover them. So therefore, your team, the team that you join when you get out of training, has to share that time in those cases. If you receive subspecialty training, you'll likely find yourself doing some more general surgical pathology work than you anticipated. So in your mind, if you think, I want this type of job, and I'm going to look for this type of job, it may not match up with what employers need, especially when it comes to the increase in surgical pathology cases. With that said, don't out-train yourself. When it's a tough job market, attend one fellowship after residency instead of multiple fellowships. Unless you want to really, really uber specialize, the market needs physicians to enter the workforce sooner than possible. Relationships are crucial. If you just answer questions with yes and no, it doesn't give color to who you are and your personality, your work style, your work ethic. And so, I know a lot of you are probably just hitting apply, and in all these different avenues. And then when you get all these applications as an employer, nothing really separates you from the rest. So when you do get a scheduled phone call, make the best of it. Make sure it's important, because that first step is the picture that they have of you moving forward, and vice versa. The picture of your future employer you have as well. So what's your strategy? It's interesting. My 14-year-old daughter is going through learning to play golf. And golf is nothing but strategy, right? So when you're looking for a job, you got to have some specific strategies in mind. Step one, optimize your time. We'll get into this further, but when do you start looking? How do you start looking? Is very, very crucial. So we have a poll that we wanted to ask you all as participants. First question was, where's Oklahoma? And then Missy has a live poll that she would like to share.
So go ahead and, oh yeah, I see people are already taking the poll. Thank you. We'll give you guys like a minute to really think about it. And then we should be able to end the poll and show you the answers, which is also pretty fun. Also, if there's anyone who popped a question into the Q&A, if we don't answer it live, there was someone who was saying, hey, I'd like to get in touch. I've already taken down your information, and we will be in touch with you following this webinar. The other questions we'll try to answer during the live Q&A.
And I see, Missy, we've already got one question coming in, which is actually another topic that we talked about right before our webinar. So this.
Oh, really? I'll check it out.
Fun. Okay.
Great minds think alike. Okay, we'll get you guys about 5 more seconds to enter your poll. It looks like right now About 62% of participants are saying, I'm not sure yet. And so I think this is a good time for you to hop on this webinar because Jeremiah is going to give you some tips on next steps. Okay, so there's the results. Most people are not sure about when they're going to start their search. Following that, 3 out of 13 groups on here have said I've already started, and the rest of you are saying, hey, in the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna get the search started. So thanks for participating.
Yeah, thanks for participating. Yeah, 62%. I'm going to talk to the 62 percenters. If you're on the fence, if you're going to apply for another fellowship, or if you're finishing residency and you're thinking about taking that one fellowship, really take to heart what we're saying about employers with multiple fellowships. And if you're just really busy and haven't gotten started yet, we can help. We can help with the forest through the trees. So now, specifically, 2023 graduating fellows. Based on that 62%, my recommendation is to start looking now. It's interesting. We've run across a few fellows graduating that assume that when they are finished in June, they can start a job in July. That's not the case. There's a step called credentialing and licensing that is crucial, that really pinpoints that start date. FCVS is kind of the central source verification. That's good for helping the credentialing process. It helps with licensure and stuff like that too. So know that there's licensure that affects, credentialing and licensure timeframes that affects your start date. So what are the steps to get a job? Pre-COVID, it was, a telephone phone call, maybe 2 site visits, and that process took a couple months. Now that virtual, like we are now, virtual allows faster turnaround time and real-time recruiting. So you may have a couple of virtual calls, typically 30 minutes to an hour. And then round 2 is typically an on-site interview. And during that interview, a lot of candidates are getting offers when they're leaving or at the interview itself. So we prepare our candidates to, one, present well on the on-site or the virtual interview, prep them for the on-site interview, and then an offer. Why is this important? Important, again, scheduling, signing the agreement. A lot of this stuff can be done electronically. So just all these things are things that are speed bumps in the time frame for a start. Consider practice preferences. When I talk to a lot of candidates, I get them on the phone, or we send out communication via email, the first question that we get back is, what's it paying? My philosophy and Rich's philosophy is that you put compensation first and you sacrifice these 3 other things. But if you put geography, your practice setting, your work-life balance, and then naturally compensation will come into play last. So keep that in mind when you're looking for positions, because the market has adjusted based on experience. Ben Franklin, I wish I had more of those bills in my pocket. Ben Franklin was a pro-con list person. So when you're comparing your practices with the strategy that you've created, creating that pro-con list for each practice and location, whether it's academia or private practice, know your pros and cons. And consider your personal life too. No one makes a decision in a vacuum. We just got a bid to cut down a tree in our yard. I had to talk with my wife, spend some money. So it's a lot of money. So I wanted to include her in the decision making. We see a lot of physicians marrying physicians. You know, moving kids during high school is tough. And, you know, more importantly, you know, we've even shown in a few polls, work-life balance is really number one over compensation when it comes to individual search. And this is the social media poll that we did. We did one on LinkedIn. You know, some of the top three things, compensation, geographic location, work-life balance, were the most important things for people. And then in our Twitter poll, work-life balance was the majority of the response. So let's understand the compensation landscape. Here are some research industry numbers. Know that the market will pay you based on your experience. Don't let the best offer conversations drive your decisions. Let your priorities and the market for your opportunities guide you. Here are some of the Modern Healthcare's list of top doctors' salaries. We kind of see where pathology lands. My thought on this, and I need to look at the data, so this is an opinion. I think that a lot of this is in the private practice sector, not mostly academic. Typically something with a type of partnership track or very robust volume bonus. We're seeing a lot more compensation models change to a volume type base plus bonus structure. And that goes back to the previous slide of doing additional general sign out to help the team with cases. Salaries are on the rise. You know, that's what happens when your basic supply demand economic curves change. It is a candidates market. Employers are seeing a great resignation. And here are some of the numbers to what to expect. Now, these numbers are, you know, based on coming out of residency and training programs. So if you're interviewing for a job, if you're a dermatopathologist just coming out of training and you're interviewing with a group and then another candidate with 5-6+ years experience, you have to understand that there's going to be different offers for individuals with different experience. Understand benefits. You know, there's more to salary, CME, different things that we've listed here are things that you can take with you when it's time to talk compensation. We can check these boxes in that type of conversation. And here's another just kind of a different way to look at it holistically in terms of a graph on the breakdown of what your compensation would look like. So if you just focus on what's above the surface, you're going to miss more than 60% of what's below the surface on your compensation. Set yourself apart. The best jobs are the first ones to go. You know, everybody wants Miami. If someone calls me again and asks for Miami, they just put a help wanted sign out front in Miami and people line up. So if you're competitive, these jobs are going to be sought after, especially, you know, with a lot of jobs and not many candidates. And if you want in your ranking of top 3, you're going to have to be competitive. So set yourself apart in the interview process. Again, this is part of your strategy. We all like to have a good time. We all like to share with the world our good time. And once it's electronic, it never dies. So Google yourself, understand what's out there, what you can do to maybe mold what an image may look like. Because again, you're representing an organization. Yes, you have a personal life. It's part of your work-life balance. but you're also a representative of a pathology group. So just be aware of what's out there. The CV, the CV. It's the path to greatness. You know, part of what your CV is going to do, it's going to be a structure and function. Keep it plain. Don't put pictures, that kind of stuff. We'll get into that. But know your audience. When you're creating a cover letter, I'd recommend everyone create a cover letter. Very important for academics. And structure it such as introducing yourself, giving some specific examples. And I tell people, you know, tell employers why you got into pathology. Everybody has a specific personal story why they got into pathology. And if you can, again, set yourself apart on your story as part of your strategy, you'll have a leg up on your interview process and finding a job. What we would like to do, interview to win. You know, when you're interviewing, explaining yourself, know that I want this job. Earn the opportunity for an offer. You can always turn it down. Earn that opportunity. The in-person virtual, so step one, typically as we do a virtual interview, kind of what we have, what we're wearing is perfectly fine. If you want to wear a tie, great. Make eye contact and limit distractions and noises. Why is this important? Again, this is your first interaction. This is when the interview starts. Typically what we do is we help facilitate any technology issues. So when you have that first interview, typically a recruiter, if you're working with one, either a firm or an in-house recruiter, they'll typically handle any type of technology glitches or anything like that. We call it the handoff from introductions to the individuals on the call to the candidate and typically the recruiter. Your interview schedule matters. Next slide, missing. This is crucial. You know, prioritize your top 3 jobs. Go through the process that we talked about. Earn that opportunity for an offer. Be communicative with the recruiter. You know, communication is key. Rich tells me all the time, working with clients and even candidates in the process. Communication is key. It might be a simple text, but we like to talk to people. So communication is key throughout your process. Here are some typical interview questions. Typically very open-ended. The way that we suggest everybody answer the question is what we call the STAR method. S-T-A-R. It's the situation, the task, the action, and result. So what you're doing is, typically, what was your most difficult case? And maybe it's a frozen or something like that. Paint the picture of the issue, your plan of attack, and how you resolved it. Situation, task, action, result. All right. The question that everybody wants to talk about and wants to know. And we're going to give you for free, today only, the answer to compensation. So what are your financial expectations? You're asked from your future employer, what are you looking to make? Say this, get your phones out, take a picture. How are individuals at my level of experience being compensated? My expectation is to be compensated accordingly. So you're answering the question, that's fair. Now, if you're joining, let's go back to that derm practice. If you're a resident fellow and you're joining, you shouldn't be expecting to be paid what a partner is being paid. Know where you want where your self-worth is, use this statement, and the employer will take it from there. And there's always maybe some time to negotiate, but work with your recruiter on that. And now I'll hand the webinar back to Missy, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Hey, Jeremiah, thank you so much. That was some very helpful information. Now, we actually have a couple of questions in the chat, and I thought we could start with this one. Anonymously, someone is saying, hey, what do job prospects look like for transfusion medicine and blood banking? How about the new field of cell therapy?
I'll take a stab at that, Missy. We actually have done a fair amount of recruitment in blood banking TM here recently, and actually just recruited somebody for a cellular therapy program. So, the market is pretty robust in those areas right now. What we found is there's been a lot of M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions in the with the blood centers, especially across the Midwest. So there's been some consolidation with the blood centers, some change in organizations with the blood centers, but more so, we're seeing groups and practices needing TM blood bank expertise. And with pathology groups, once they reach a certain size of mass, that's especially true where they become a little bit more subspecialized in their CP areas, because it sounds like you may be whoever asked the question, maybe a TM blood banking physician or thinking about that. There's a lot of career options there, and then there are equally options for cellular therapy as well. And we've been experiencing that, and it's funny because we were just talking about this topic right before we jumped on this webinar this afternoon.
Yeah, when I saw that question, I laughed. I was like, hey,
yeah, same here. Yeah, we have a couple clients. So if you're interested, we could talk about some opportunities.
And then I see the next question, maybe from the same person, regarding what examples of CP only jobs starting at 300K. And so what I've seen and with those types of jobs, most of those positions are in either larger healthcare systems that can afford to have CP only pathologists, or the commercial setting. And so the commercial settings tend to do a good job of hiring clinical pathologists for their labs. And what I mean by the commercial settings are the Quest, the LabCorp, the Sonic.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Rich. And now we have a question from Robert. He's saying, do you have any advice for residents that have not chosen a pathology specialty or a fellowship yet? Are there subfields that you anticipate will be more or less in demand in the coming years? Great question.
Jeremiah, do you want to take a stab at that?
I can tackle that. If obviously neuropath is very specific. My recommendation would be, after your residency, cytopathology, surge path, probably the better single fellowships prepare you for the hospital setting, hospital-based setting. And part of my answer is going to be twofold. It's whether you go academic or whether you go into the private practice, non-academic. And so if you go into academics, 2 fellowships, or what your specific training is going to be, or research. Private practice world, 1 fellowship, preferably cytopathology, surge path.
Or heme path.
Heme path.
Yeah, and to add to that, I'd just like to say that, the majority of the jobs in the market today are community hospital-based pathology groups. that have been in their communities for many, many years, and their senior people are retiring. And they need the biggest shortage in pathologists right now is in the general surgical pathology realm. So any of the fellowships that will support general SP sign out or AP areas are all good fellowships to go into if you're going to go into community hospital-based practice, because in those practices, you're a generalist first, a subspecialist second.
That was nice and specific. Thanks, you guys. I also have another question. Someone's saying, and this goes back to something that we had talked about earlier on in the beginning. What would be considered higher sign out volume in surgical pathology? You know, we said it would be higher, but what does that look like? It sounds like they're asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have specific volume numbers, and it's really case by case. But you know, if the CAP is actually coming out with their new study, which will speak to this, and they're releasing it at the CAP conference coming up in a few weeks. So those numbers will be out. And I haven't seen that yet. But what we're hearing from our clients is without going into specific numbers, is that they're working much harder than they ever have before, meaning more cases, and whether that's 10 more cases a day or 25 more cases a day. My sense is per FTE or per pathologist. My sense is it's 25. And they're working much harder, meaning a longer hours. You know, one of the great things about being a pathologist, and I think one of the attractions for being a pathologist, is the work-life balance from day one. You know, you don't have the on-call pressures that surgeons and primary care and especially OB/GYN physicians have, and it's more of a 9 to 5 type setting. But what we're hearing from our clients that are in the groups that are hiring, they're working, you know, from early mornings till, you know, mid evenings to catch up on their caseloads.
Yeah, and I'll just add real quick to that question about volumes. During COVID, there was a spike in revenue in pathology cases and volumes. What I would recommend to kind of understand about where the money comes from, there's a great webinar on the Dark Report, easy to find, talking about how practice administrators, you know, boards, leaders of these groups are struggling with replacing their revenue stream post-COVID. So that may help this individual.
From COVID testing.
Probably. Yeah, from COVID testing. Yeah, all those testings have dropped, and everybody has their at-home tests and everything else. So, you know, we all learned in the 80s from Miami Vice, you follow the money, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, follow the money when it comes to that question about volumes within practices.
Follow the money. Thanks. Okay. To the next one, what are the prospects for jobs in pharmaceutical industries? What types of jobs are available?
We haven't done much in pharma, quite frankly. So we really can't speak to that specifically. I do know that, you know, there are private industry jobs available in pharma, especially in the pharmacogenomics and genetics and molecular side. And so those are the areas that we've seen the need, but we haven't really penetrated that industry very much.
Okay. Now, I love this question from Edward. I'm very interested to hear what Rich and Jeremiah have to say. What's the market looking like for pathologists that are 65 plus years in age?
Excellent question. You know, the way I'll answer this question is this, because we're with those individuals that are 65 and older, what we've seen and experienced is that a lot of people are ready to tap out, just to be honest. This doesn't answer your question specifically, but 07 and 08, everyone's 401k turned into 201k. They recovered. COVID hit. It was a debacle. And individuals that were reaching that retirement age tapped out. That's why we're talking about the Great Resignation. I feel that there's still opportunity for individuals 65 and up. But the expectation of the employer is they're working on their own individual recruitment. I would just be upfront with how long you want to work. I think that's the biggest question. It's not that they're not choosing candidates based on age. It's just, it's a team, and you want to grow a team and have retention as best as possible. So just ask yourself, how much longer do you want to work, and communicate that to your next employer, your current employer or your next employer.
Now, Jeremiah, wouldn't, and maybe Rich too, wouldn't today's market compared to maybe what the market was like 2 years ago, would it be more favorable for this age group than it was before?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been my experience that groups are much more open to that. But Jeremiah, to your point, that was a great point. The candidate, if you're in that age group, you need to be very upfront on how much longer you want to work. And if you're looking to be in the private sector and have the expectation of partnership, that's probably an unrealistic expectation. You should go into that setting as an employed, in an employed situation, and let them know, basically year to year how you're going to continue on. That being said, pathologists, as long as your mind is good and your eyes are good, you guys can work a long time, right? Because there's not a lot of physical demand. It's all mental demand. And I've seen pathologists that are amazingly sharp into their 80s, and they still sign out. I think Pepper Diener at Wash U still goes in and signs out cases, although he's retired. But I hear he still goes in at least once a week to sign out cases. So,
okay, hopefully Edward, that answers your question. Great question. Thanks, you guys. Now, someone is asking, what are the usual dollar amounts for bonuses for experienced 15+ years pathologists in a high volume, high complexity private practice? So let's talk bonus.
Yeah, the bonus varies by, there's so many variants to that to speak to.
Location, reimbursement rates. There's a lot that goes into, the RVU, the total RVU and work RVU in this type of question.
Case load, specialty, derm path, for instance, where there's production thresholds. And if you're in a commercial setting and just per se, as I say, pushing glass, those individuals tend to do really well, that are 15+ years of experience and are able to confidently sign out cases on their own and have a higher throughput. So, I would say to the candidate who has asked that question, call one of us and we can discuss your situation, and then we would be happy to give you some advice on where we think you should be based on your specific situation.
Yeah, and then another way to answer this is what we're seeing a lot too, when this happened in the 90s, is that these community medical centers that have an academic component were being paid based on academics, but they were doing the work as kind of like a private practice. So we're seeing out of the 45 searches that we have, is just guesstimate, we have about 10 clients that are transitioning their compensation model to a base plus bonus. And that really kind of aligns with the extra work for the surgical sign-outs. SurgPath sign out. So, you know, we can make these connections, you know, of why this is happening. And so just kind of getting in the weeds a little bit about these transitions, the market is adjusting for that additional work that you all are doing outside of your subspecialty.
All right.
And then it looks like Dr. Joshi has their hand raised.
Oh, let me see here. Hold on.
If you go under.
Yes, thank you. Here we go, Dr. Joshi. You should be able to.
Yeah. So my question is about digital pathology. If someone doesn't want to move, and how is it coming along? And are there any jobs so you don't have to relocate?
Great question. Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion around this with you know, the college and at the Executive War College on digital pathology, and we're seeing more and more groups implement it. And there are going to be there are jobs in digital pathology for certain specialties, right? Derm path, GI, GU. There's a big group that does nothing but GU pathology, so it depends on what your and they're going to look for fellowship trained, ideally subspecialists in these areas. That said, I believe that, you know, we're still about a 5 to 10 years out from being fully digitized, because it's a very costly undertaking for any group or healthcare system. And so there are jobs, and we're seeing more jobs like that out there. And those jobs, you know, are going to compensate kind of a per case or per click reimbursement back to the pathologist. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be predominant.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. You know, Epic is the #1 electronic health medical record in the United States. Globally, it's Cerner. It's getting all this technology to work, and you know, all the subsets of Epic and how these systems talk together, which is a plug for IT people. You always have a job, but you know, another way to answer that question, 2 things I think are going to change the landscape of pathology. One, which will help work-life balance, is going digital, which will take some time. And then 2, which I think is kind of some Star Trek kind of stuff, is molecular testing straight from the slide, which would be kind of neat. So I think molecular and genetics will probably be a major specialty in the next 10 years. Would you agree, Rich?
Yeah, it's certainly growing in popularity and higher demand. So, and the you know, the general community hospital based groups, you know, are that are doing the bread and butter pathology aren't quite there with molecular and genomics yet. So, and quite frankly, even the clinicians aren't ordering those tests because they don't know about them or don't want to. Some of the, you know, the more kind of set in their ways and the way they practice.
Good question.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Thank you so much for raising your hand. And Rich, I'm glad you saw that one. I see another one in the question in the Q&A. Are there many jobs, specifically derm path, that pay per case or per slide rather than salary? Or is this not really growing in popularity?
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. And we haven't been seeing that. You know, I've been doing this for a minute now. And, you know, years ago, thanks, Missy, I was much younger, that was predominantly the way that derm paths were paid. In today's market, it's salary plus. Reimbursement has a lot to do with that.
Yes.
And the markets have a lot to do with that. You know, CMS has been hammering, you know, reimbursement rates in lab medicine and pathology over the years. And they just keep, and that's probably the biggest threat looming right now. And I think believe that that's where the biggest dollars go for the CAP lobbyists, is to make sure that it stays, whole. So.
Yeah. And specifically for derm, what I've been reading and the handful of searches that we have with clients that are also adjusting their pay scale specifically for derm path is they do that global billing. The pro fee and the technical fee, not a per slide
right, they're the global
reimbursement.
Right.
Yeah. So that's hard. It's really hard for accounting and a practice administrator to, then you start getting into the weeds of, well, I'm doing all the Mohs cases, and this other person is, doing skin biopsies. It's just.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing as much of the TCPC models either. So that's where the dermatology groups are contracting directly with the derm paths. There's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the dermatology world. And so a lot of those practices have rolled up under these mega groups, and they've got their own labs now.
Excellent. Now, one thing I did want to point out, there is one more question, and I will get to that in 2 seconds. We value these questions, and I feel like we've gotten some extremely solid questions during this session. We do have a website, but also social media channels, and we are often answering common questions that we get from pathologists like yourselves on those social channels. So the handles are here for you to follow us, and we're also sharing helpful articles, that kind of thing. And I'm also I switched the slide. If you're interested, you can use your phone to use this QR code, and it'll lead you right to our job board. So if you're interested in seeing what kind of jobs we have here at Santé, this is a good place to just kind of check it out. Now, I have a question from Dr. Joshi again. She would like to connect with us afterwards. Absolutely. I'm going to take down your email address, and we'll be in touch with you. I also have your cell phone. So thank you so much. All right. Are there any other questions? We want to make sure we have 3 minutes left, and we're happy to use those 3 minutes well if there are any other questions from attendees. I do want to say this has been great. I really appreciate the back and forth, the thoughtfulness of the questions that you've been sending in, and just for your time. We know you're busy.
Yeah, and if you have a quick response for you personally, or you might be listening as a group, out of 5 stars, what did you get out of this? Just real quick in the chat. We're interested, since we have a little extra time, just to see what
Jeremiah, if you don't mind, immediately after this webinar is finished, you will get a survey in your inbox. Now, if you are attending as a group, for instance, you have a program coordinator who's playing it for a classroom, or you're in a group with other people, that would be great. So I'm glad Jeremiah brought that up. If you're not able to get that in your individual email, if you don't mind adding that to the chat or in the Q&A, that would be lovely. Feedback is so helpful.
And then the other thing that I want to point out, 2 things. One would be, if you're attending the CAP conference coming up in New Orleans in early October, it's their fall conference. We will be at the job fair, so stop by and see us. And then I am a panelist for the House of Delegates CAP Residence Forum on Saturday morning. And then if you're in California, any of the participants this evening in California, there is a webinar that the California Pathology Society is giving in 2 parts on the job market for pathology. And we are also participating in that.